In this video, we will show you how to replace your motor mount on this Toyota Sienna with a 3.5-liter engine. This will be located along the front of your engine compartment. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. To gain access to the motor mount, we're going to be starting underneath the front of the vehicle. With that said, safely raise and support, and we'll start removing our plastic shield. Now along each side of the vehicle, we're going to have to remove this smaller plastic panel before we can remove the larger panel that makes its way all the way across. For each of these panels, you're going to find that you have a plastic push clip. We'll just go ahead and pull out the center of that to unlock it, remove it, a quick inspection. Now moving towards the side of the vehicle here, you'll find that you have three 10mm headed mounting bolts, and we can remove this panel. Do the same on the opposite side of the vehicle. Let's go over and do the same on the other side of the vehicle. With those side pieces out, the next thing we have to do is make our way towards the center of that panel. Along the back side there is where you're going to find two push clips. We have to separate those from the subframe. Just use a small prying device for this. You can pop those right out. We'll get this one over here. Now let's make our way along the front of that panel. You're going to find that you have several 10mm headed bolts making their way all the way across. Now we'll make our way towards the center of that shield. We only have 4 more remaining push clips making their way across. For these push clips, you want to push in the center to unlock them and then remove them with the outer portion. You can use pretty much anything to push in the inner portion there. Small pick. Pull this whole thing right out of here. Once you do have that clip out of there, you want to make sure that you reset it to the starting position. To do that, you just want to push that center all the way through the other side so it's protruding out just like this. A quick inspection, make your way down the line, completing the same process. Okay, this is getting loose now. We'll make sure we're holding it up. Let's remove the panel. With the shield out of the way, we have a clear view of our mount. On that mount, you have a rubber hose that protrudes out and it makes its way towards the driver's side. It's attached to this area. We need to separate it. To do that, we'll just use a small pick, carefully make our way in between this area, separating the hose. I always like to see if it's soft and pliable. We're replacing it anyways. We'll double check up in this area, make sure nothing's damaged here as well. Now we'll continue on to this 10mm headed mounting bolt that holds this bracket in place. Go ahead and remove that. Can separate that. With that disconnected, we can start talking about the mounting hardware. You're going to find that you have 3 14mm headed mounting nuts attached to studs which are part of the mount. There's one of the mounting nuts just out in the open here, one just behind the subframe, and the third one's hidden behind this rubber boot. Let's get this protective boot out of the way. A quick inspection, you do want to reuse this. Can remove our 14mm headed mounting nut up in this area. Continuing underneath the vehicle, we're going to have to apply some support underneath the engine and transmission. The safest place to do so is right along the center area here, and we'll make sure we use a chunk of wood. You only need to apply enough pressure that it's holding everything up, and we can make our way out from under the vehicle into the engine compartment. All right, we got our wood. Let's get the jack under here and get it aligned. Start applying pressure. Now up in the engine compartment, we're going to remove the 2 hoses from along the air inlet tube. These pretty much just press into some plastic clips, you can just pull them right out of there. Like that. This one down here. Same thing, just go ahead and slide it right on out. Set that aside. Next, we'll be moving along to these two 10mm headed mounting bolts. The next thing we'll start to do is lift this up and pull it forward. It's going to come up and out of this position, but it has to come forward out away from the box down in here. Get this up and out of here. Just have to twist as needed. Now that we have that out of the way, we'll have a look straight down this area. We can see that mount. Directly along the top of it, you're going to find a 17mm headed mounting bolt. Go ahead and pull that out of there. Now, staying in this area, you can see one piece of our mounting hardware here. There's also a nut located directly along the top. And then if you were to go on the other side of this mount, you're going to find another 14mm headed mounting bolt holding this in place. Let's start with this one that we can see right out in the open. Now, moving from the other side of where we just worked, you're going to find another 14mm headed mounting bolt. Let's get this one out of there as well. Now let's move up to the center of that bracket. In this area, you're going to find a 14mm headed mounting nut. We'll go ahead and remove the nut from the mounting stud, and then we can remove the entire upper bracket here from the mount. There's that nut. Before we can get this bracket off of here, gently jack up the engine just enough that you can remove the bracket. Here we are. A quick inspection of that upper bracket, and we'll set it aside. With all the mounting hardware and bracket out of position, go ahead and take hold of that mount, and we'll lift it up and out of here. There it is, friend. Now it's time to clean the mounting areas. We'll start down along the bottom at the subframe. Just give this a quick wipe, make sure nothing looks like it's rotted and damaged or even weak. This looks good. Let's move along to inspecting the transmission. So we'll move up from there. We got the areas on the transmission, 2 points where the bolts went into, one area just above with the stud coming out of it here. Oh, this looks good. Okay, it's time to install our brand new mount. We'll make sure we have this in the proper orientation, so we have the hose facing over towards the driver's side. Move those hoses. When it's in the proper placement, it should slide right down into that subframe. Everything should line up perfectly. With that mount resting in place, we'll continue on with the upper bracket. We'll get this in position. At that point, we can start in all the upper mounting hardware here. You may have to raise or lower the engine as needed to be able to get this bracket in place. When installing this bracket, you may find you have to maneuver the mount around to be able to get the bracket and the mount into the proper placement. We'll start with the center bolt through the bracket directly into that mount. You need to make sure you start everything in by hand. You don't want to cross-thread it into the wrong positioning. We're going to leave everything nice and loose so we can maneuver things around as necessary while we continue starting all of the hardware in. Let's move from that bolt directly above it to that stud that has the 14mm headed mounting nut. Start that on there. And now we have those two 14mm headed bolts, one on either side of this upper mounting bracket. Moving from there, we have our last mounting bolt over on the passenger side. Now that we have all the mounting hardware up here started, we're going to start with the hardware that holds this upper bracket to the transmission. We'll snug the 2 bolts and 1 nut, and then torque each of these to 47 foot-pounds. Now we can get that upper mounting nut. Now that they're snug, we'll torque them to that 47 like I mentioned. Get that mounting nut up here. Now before we tighten this center mounting bolt that holds the bracket to the mount itself, go ahead and remove the pressure from underneath your engine. You can remove that support. Use our 17mm for this one. The torque for this is 64 foot-pounds. At this point, we finished installing the hardware for that mount from up along the top, but we still need to make our way down along the bottom for the rest of the hardware. Let's make our way safely under the vehicle. Now from underneath the vehicle, we'll start with the mounting nuts that hold that mount to the subframe of the vehicle. We have one right here on this stud out in the open, one directly behind it on the back side of that subframe, and the other one's up through this port that leads into the subframe. For this mounting hardware, we're going to snug it, and the torque for this is 38 foot-pounds. With this hardware torqued, let's make sure we protect the area with our rubber plug. Now we'll be paying attention along the driver's side of that engine mount. We have to secure this hose to its mounting point right along this area here. Now before we start cutting this, you need to make sure that the bracket goes into the original position. We're going to align the mounting hole here, and now we can take the hose and swing it up pretty close to where it needs to go. Once you know the exact length that you need, just go a little bit longer and go ahead and trim it off. It's a lot easier to trim off a little bit more if needed than to try to extend the hose. So we'll come over here. We've got the bracket pretty close to where we need it. I can see that I need to go right about there. Take it a little extra. Now we'll take that hose and slide it into position. Now looking here, you can tell that this hose still has to be pressed on. You don't want to leave this hose loose. Continue pressing until it's completely bottomed out, and then we'll just give it a light tug to make sure it's completely secured. If it's still loose for some reason, use a wire tie if necessary. Now we can get this bracket into the proper position. We'll make sure that we have it aligned with its mounting points here and that mounting bolt hole. Start in the mounting bolt and snug it up. There's our little mounting bolt. Okay, right there's where it bottomed out. Just take it a tiny bit further than that just to ensure that it is properly secured here. Give the bracket a wiggle. If it moves around, that bolt is not tight enough. Now we can install our lower shield here. Just get this in position. Once you feel as though you have it in the proper position, you want to continue in this center area here. We do have 4 push clips that we're going to install. To install your push clips, you want to drive in the outer portion first and then lock it in by driving in the center. Next, we have our 6 10mm headed mounting bolts that go across the front of this shield directly into that front bumper cover. Now moving from the front of the shield all the way towards the back, we had those 2 long push clips that go directly from the shield up into the subframe. Press those right in there. Along each side, we have these lower panels. These will go directly in front of the wheel well. Let's press everything together. Align your 3 mounting bolt holes and your 1 push clip hole. We'll start in the hardware. Once you're sure this side of the vehicle is secured, go over and do the exact same thing on the opposite side of the vehicle. One last quick inspection in this area, and now we can make our way out from under the vehicle. It's time to insert our air inlet tube. We want to make sure that that aligns in the area that it needs to with the air filter housing box there. We'll just slide this down and into the proper position. Now with this in position, let's get our hoses reattached. We'll just press them right into their locking clips. This one, the clip came out of there, it's okay. Just slide it right in. Make our way down to the bottom area there for our final clip. Double check those hoses to make sure they're secured all the way up. And now we'll continue on with our 2 mounting bolts holding this to the radiator support coming across. Start in both of those 10mm bolts and snug them up. Okay friend, we finished the installation of our mount. At this point, you can go ahead and start up the vehicle, let it run for a little while, make sure you don't hear any funny noises, and then take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.